All right, this one's called She Gave God a Name. It's a sermon where Hagar is the hero. So first of all, before I share my thoughts, go find somewhere a poem by Audre Lorde called A Litany for Survival and read it. Read it aloud. Read it slowly. Let it sink in. And then come on back here and hear my thoughts. The world is not fair. We live in a world full of exploitation. We have for a long time. You can scan our history and come up with plenty of heartbreaking examples. Women exploited by men who treat them like property. Indigenous people exploited by settlers who claimed their homelands and infected them with disease and with ideas of ownership. Kidnapped Africans exploited by landowning Europeans who stole their labor and used their bodies in whatever ways they chose with impunity. And poor and working class people exploited by bosses and politicians who make sure their wages are just low enough to keep them on the edge of desperation and dependence. The world is not fair. And of course, there are powerful exceptions. There are men who value, cherish, and uplift women. Settlers and descendants of settlers who strive to dismantle the false ideas of ownership and to repair harms done. White people who are doing the work of recognizing how racism continues to infect every level of our lives together and helping to build actively anti-racist institutions and business owners and public figures who insist on living wages for working people and who define those wages not based on mere subsistence, but on creating opportunities to thrive. But my point remains, the world is not fair. And we are each affected by that in different ways. Some of us live up against the odds of the systems and circumstances that we're born into. Some of us live boosted by those same odds, the odds of the systems and circumstances that we're born into. But whatever our situation, the world is not fair. And we get to help it shift, bending the world toward greater justice. For all of us, whatever our circumstances, the most effective way of changing the world is by shifting our focus from what we can't control to what we can change. This is a spiritual practice of resilience that forms a pathway to faithful participation in the continuous work of creation. And that is what I want to take a look at now. Now, you've heard the serenity prayer, right? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's a good prayer. There's another prayer, a chunk of a poem by Adrian Rich with a similar sentiment. It goes like this: my heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I've cast my lot with those who age after age perversely with no extraordinary power reconstitute the world. Now, whether the odds are stacked against you or whether you were born with privilege that has benefited you in this life, where are you casting your lot? I'm casting my lots on people like Hagar. I read this whole saga between Sarah, Abraham, and Hagar with Hagar as the hero. That is my cultivated bias. At Bible study on Wednesday evenings at my church, we've been practicing the art of acknowledging our own perspective, our own biases, and the ways that we bring our own lived experience into how we interpret sacred text. When we acknowledge our own perspective, we are then able to see how other people's perspectives can help us glean more insight and wisdom from the Bible or whatever sacred text than we ever would have been able to see on our own. And we have the chance then to take what we glean and put it to use, making the world better for more people. That's what we're aiming to do when we open up stories like the one about Abraham and Sarah banishing Hagar and her child to the desert. That's the story in Genesis chapter 21. At the end of that one, Hagar and Ishmael make their way to some kind of liberty, passing through and making themselves right at home in all kinds of wilderness along the way. But the first time they find themselves in the desert is earlier in the saga, in Genesis chapter 16. In Genesis chapter 16, Abram and Sarai are wealthy from a successful stint of time living in Egypt, but they have no children. This is before they got their names changed and before their son Isaac was born. Sarai and Abram have been unable to conceive a child, and Sarai is afraid, understandably, for a woman in patriarchal society, that her infertility makes her obsolete. So she does something that had precedent at the time. She has an Egyptian-born slave girl in her service, a girl named Hagar. And Sarai tells Abram to make Hagar his wife and impregnate her for the sake of Sarai and Abram's legacy. We don't hear from Hagar at this point in the story because she's not seen in her full humanity. Her name, Hagar, just means foreigner, and she's seen as a possession, as a foreign object to be used for surrogacy. Abram does what Sarai suggests, and Hagar conceives a child. At this point, we start to see some of the ways that Hagar moves the story. I'm quoting here, "When she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, 'May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me.' But Abram said to Sarai, 'Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please.' Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and Hagar ran away from her." The Hebrew word here for how Sarai treats Hagar is anach. It's more than harshness. It means to afflict, to oppress, to humiliate. It's the same word used in the book of Exodus for how the Egyptians oppress the Israelites when they call on God to rescue them. Hagar rescues herself. You see, she hasn't met God yet, not on her own terms. No doubt she has heard all about the faith of her oppressors, but it's doubtful that she would be much inspired personally by the faith of a woman who abuses her. It's doubtful that she's compelled by the God of a man who treats her as his property. And yet the living God lingers behind the imperfections and incompleteness of human faith. Hagar runs away to the wilderness to escape the system of oppression that she was born into. And here's more from Genesis chapter 16. "The angel of the Lord found Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness and said, 'Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?' She said, 'I'm running away from my mistress Sarai.' The angel of the Lord said to her, 'Return to your mistress and submit to her.'" Now, I don't know about you, but this was a problem for me when I read it. Not cool, God. Not cool. You don't tell someone to go back to their abuser. That's clear as day. So what are we to do with this passage that is clouded by such poor divine counsel? Now, there's a theologian that helped to illuminate this passage for me, helped me see that God isn't meeting with Hagar on theoretical terms, but is with her right in the grit of her actual wilderness experience. The theologian who helped me see this was Dolores Williams, a womanist theologian. Reading the Bible and looking at God through her multifaceted experience of being a black woman born in the American South. In the figure of Hagar, Dolores Williams sees the remarkable resilience of her own ancestors, stolen from their homelands and enslaved in America. The powerful thing about Dolores Williams' womanist perspective is that she was able to offer a corrective to the male-dominated black liberation theology of the time, as well as a nuanced opening up of the white-dominated feminist theology of the time. You see, in both black theology and feminist theology at the time that Dolores Williams was writing, there was such a strong push for active liberation that oftentimes the insurmountably harsh realities of the actual lived experience of black women was overlooked. If we're always insisting that conquering the oppressors is the mark of success and salvation, then we will miss how powerful the acts of survival are among the oppressed. In the Hagar story, we see a woman who encounters God in the wilderness, who has the audacity to do what she needs to do for her and her child to survive. She needs shelter. When she encounters God, she's in the desert at the edge of death. She needs food and water. So she returns to the household of Sarai and Abram, but she returns as one who has escaped. She returns with power, with her dignity intact. Hagar's power is the power of those who make a way in the wilderness, who make a way where there is no way. And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael. For the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He will be a wild ass of a man, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all his kin. So she named the Lord. Hagar named the Lord who spoke to her. You are El Roi. One more thing about Hagar that Dolores Williams points out. Hagar is the only person in the Bible to ever give God a name. Hagar names God, El Roi, God who sees me. 13 years ago, I submitted my final thesis paper, the culminating project from my seminary education. In it, I explored these themes, engaging a womanist perspective, looking for a theology of salvation that was not about escape, but about the power of survival in the midst of a world falling apart. I explored these themes because I am inspired and convicted by those who have survived the worst imaginable circumstances, especially at the hands of other humans. At the end of my thesis, which was like 50 pages long, I struggled with how to bring it home. Personally, as a white, straight, documented, financially secure man, what do I do with this model of power? How do I respond to the story of Hagar beyond mere admiration? At the beginning of this essay, I said, the most effective way of changing the world is by shifting our focus from what we can't control to what we can change. It's easier to focus on what we can't control. The things we can't control are sticky with fear and doubt and worry, but what we can change is far more interesting, far more full of possibility. Hagar, right there in the extremities of the wilderness, was not able to change the system that oppressed her. Hagar's particular model of resilience and power is the power of the oppressed to survive, to resist oppression, and in so doing claim space in a system that was built to erase them. Your lived experience may be like Hagar's in some ways. If so, hear this now. God sees you in your power and dignity and resilience. Your lived experience may be more like my own, full of privileges based on the circumstances of your birth. For us, Hagar's power is not ours to claim, not exactly. Instead, what is available to us is to learn from Hagar's God, El Roi, the God who sees. How might we shift our focus from the fears and anxieties about the world that are distracting us and give our attention instead to those who God sees? Who among those I encounter am I not seeing in their full dignity and resilience, and how might I praise them for surviving and generously contribute to their thriving. Let's move through today with that question in our hearts, and in so doing, bend the world a little bit more toward justice.